Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding literacy teacher educator on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. And this is the Get Literate podcast. On this podcast, we explore the power of leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading and notebooks and writing. We lean into our curiosity and creativity and embrace a spirit of lifelong learning to cultivate a life we love. Now, grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. Did you know that June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month? It's time to go purple. You know I like to use the calendar to guide my reading for the month, and today I thought I would share 3 books about Alzheimer's and dementia in order to bring awareness to Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. If you can believe it, over 55 million people right now are living with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. So that means I am pretty sure that all of us in some way have been impacted by this disease, whether it's a parent, a brother, a sister, a grandparent, a caregiver, someone else that you know. People are struggling. Caregivers are struggling. This is a disease that wreaks havoc, not just on the person who's afflicted with it, but everyone around them as we watch that person change and the interactions and the relationships and the dynamics of the family change too. Now, before I dive in, I want to share a little bit about what's different today, or what is going to be different today about the podcast and the show notes. Now, I, as you might expect, love listening to bookish podcasts. I probably listen to too many of them each week as I attempt to build my own TBR. But honestly, I can get overwhelmed on those podcasts really quickly. Some of the podcasts I listen to might mention 20 or 25 books in a single episode. That's why when I started my podcast, I wanted to limit it to 3 books. 3 books that were powerful for me, which means they might be powerful for you. But we know that didn't always happen. I always seem to have more than 3 recommendations. And so some of the podcasts got quite long. But I think I found the solution. In the podcast episode today and in the future, I'm going to stick to my 3-book recommendation rule. Those may be all adult books, a mix of adult and children's literature, who knows, depending on the topic. But because I have more books that I want to share on every single topic I talk about here, I've decided to create book lists that I'll house on my blog at alitlife.com. So the podcast episodes and the podcast show notes will be the 3 books that have really made an impact on me. But if you want to hear more, you can click on the related book list for that topic, where I'll be adding books all year long as I encounter them in my own reading life. I think it's going to be the perfect balance between not overwhelming with too many titles, but having all the titles you want in a list right when you want them. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to share 3 books that have been personally, powerfully, and meaningfully important in my reading life, and therefore my actual reading life, in hopes that they are just as important to you, but know that there are more where this came from in case this is a topic you really want to dig into. So what are the 3 books I'm going to share with you today, specifically focused on Alzheimer's and brain awareness? Now, I should have mentioned that June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, but November is World Awareness Day for Alzheimer's. So we've got 2 points of the year, and rightfully so, to explore this topic. So while I'm sharing books now, know that later in November, I'll update and refresh that list so we've got even more that we might be able to choose from. So I've got 1 adult fiction selection for you, 1 powerful memoir, and 1 middle grade book. You know, I love a good middle grade book. I wanted to give us a balance of perspectives, a balance of views, and I think this book collection does that quite well. So what's the one I want to begin with? I want to begin with a short but powerful book that packs a punch. That book is And Every Morning, The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. Anything I've ever read by Frederick Bachman has been completely engrossing and completely powerful. And this book is no exception. This is a novella, so it is a short story. It's a beautiful short story about the power of the mind and what happens when it loses control. Now, to be honest with you, when I first started reading this book, I was very confused. I could not figure out what was going on. Who was the character? Who was talking? What time frame were we in? And that was purposeful. The story actually takes place inside the mind of a grandfather who is struggling with dementia, and he is trying desperately to hold on to those memories. And Bachman gives you that feeling. You can feel the struggle. You can feel the panic. You can feel the despair as those stories are slipping away. But it's not just a story of the grandfather. It's also the story of his son and his grandson who are trying to grapple with this new reality that they are all living in and how to best support him. So we get a lot of different perspectives here. We get the perspective from the person who is struggling with Alzheimer's, but we also get the perspective of his family at different points in their lives as they're trying to figure it all out and make the best of the situation. Anyone who has ever been close to Alzheimer's or close to dementia, you will feel seen inside this book. You will get exactly what he is trying to accomplish and what he does accomplish. But even if you are not close to Alzheimer's or dementia, you won't be able to read this book and walk away without this pretty amazing newfound understanding and appreciation and awe for anyone who is touched by that disease. It's just that powerful. I'm still thinking about it weeks and weeks from when I read it, and I'm just so amazed at how he captured the confusion of the mind on the pages so that the reader can really feel it and feel the emotions and yet also feel hope and also feel the connections that can still be there, even if they feel weaker and weaker over time. It is a powerful book, short story with a big punch, and I highly recommend it to anyone, not just someone impacted by Alzheimer's or dementia, but anyone who wants a reminder that we need to better appreciate the time that we have and the clarity that we have and not take it for granted. So that's Frederick Bachman's And Every Morning, The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. Now, next up is a memoir. This book is called What We Carry by Maya Shanbag Lane. I have not gotten this book out of my head since I read it a couple of years ago. It was just that powerful. It's beautifully written. Oh, it's so lyrical. And it's just this highly addictive avalanche of emotions from cover to cover. That's really the best way I can describe it. From the first page to the last page, you are in. Now, when I picked up the book, I specifically picked it up because of the mother-daughter relationships I knew it was going to explore. That's what I came into the book expecting. I thought I would get some insight into Maya's life and her relationship with her mother, hopeful that I could learn from her motherhood stories to better write my own. But instead, I got so much more. I got a unique insight into my own life, into my own expectations, my own relationships, definitely my own sense of motherhood and my own sense of mothering and what that means. I laughed in this book. I cried in this book. I cried some more in this book as Maya's words just seemed to directly speak to the reader and specifically just directly speak to me, leaving me with lessons on the page that I just could not escape. I really didn't expect to find some of the twists and turns in Maya's story that specifically are impacted by her mother's struggle, and therefore hers, with Alzheimer's and dementia. How that process reveals who they really are, the secrets that perhaps they're keeping, and what that means for how they pair together in the future. I really haven't found the right words yet to adequately state just how much this book has impacted my heart. So I'm just going to leave you with one last line. This book has forever changed how I view myself, my own mother, motherhood, and all of the tangled bonds woven between each. So if you're looking for a book that isn't just going to touch on Alzheimer's and dementia, but it's really going to explore the relationship aspects of it, particularly the bonds between mother and daughter, then I highly, highly recommend What We Carry by Maya Schonbag Lane. Now, my third book to bring to you is a favorite. There are a lot of middle grade books that I could have brought to this third book today, and don't worry, they will be in the book list that I am creating. But the one that always rises to the top for me, at least for now, until I keep reading, is Sticky Notes by Diane Touchel. Now, this book found me. I wasn't looking for this book. I happened to spot the cover and just knew I had to have it. The cover is covered with sticky notes swirling all around this young boy. I love a good sticky note. I love a good middle grade novel. And I knew that that one loaned copy of that book on the bookstore bookshelf must have been meant to me because it caught my eye. So ever since then, though, I really haven't been able to stop thinking about it. This book is a heart toucher, right? It is about a young boy who is living with his father's early onset Alzheimer's disease. So this is different than the other two books. The other two books are dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia in more of a traditional fashion, if I can even say that. The characters who are afflicted with Alzheimer's are well into their older years, but not in this book. This book focuses on early onset Alzheimer's disease with a dad who shouldn't really have to be experiencing it yet. And we learn about that experience from the perspective of this young boy. But even though the book is entirely written in his perspective, we learn how the disease impacts the patient, the dad, the caregivers, the mom, the family, the web of people who come into contact with the family, and so much more. It's so beautifully written. And I say beautifully written because it beautifully captures a painful journey of truth, confusion that happens, the fear that comes, the fatigue of dealing with it all. And yeah, even the shame, all of it, all of those feelings are in it. But in really capturing that painful journey truthfully and beautifully, she gives us a glimpse into the perspectives of all of those stakeholders that we really wouldn't be able to see if we were living in the reality of the disease, right? You see what you see. We can't understand the perspective of the person who's actually afflicted with this disease. We can't understand someone else's reality, but we can when we read it in a book. And not only that, I think this book is so powerful because we learn the perspective of a young boy and how it impacts him. And I don't care how old you are, if you are dealing with a loved one who is struggling with Alzheimer's and dementia, who is losing their memory, who might not be able to remember you, you become that young 10-year-old again. This book speaks to children, but it speaks to all of our inner childs for people who are going through something really hard related to this. I think everyone needs to read this book, but especially if you have been impacted by this disease, It's a book that reminds you you are not alone, and it will definitely change the way that you see things. I promise. It's that powerful. So there you have it. 3 books that I think are at the top of my list to really dig into and explore Alzheimer's and dementia. We've got And Every Morning, The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. What We Carry, a Memoir by Maya Schambag Lang. And Sticky Notes by Diane Tuchel. Now, remember, these are the 3 books that were most powerful for me. But there are more books out there that might be more powerful for you. So I have created a more extensive list of books that you might also be interested reading in. And that list is going to be separate from the show notes so that I can keep adding to it again and again and again. Now, a link to the list will be inside the show notes, but you can come back all year long and just browse that list and see the new additions that I've made. You'll find books like Still Alice by Lisa Genova, The Things We Keep by Sally Hepworth, Goodbye Vitamin by Rachel Kong, and The Space Between Lost and Found, a middle grade novel by Sandy Stark McGinnis, and of course, many, many others. But you know I would love to hear your feedback. What books do you recommend to me that touch upon and explore Alzheimer's and dementia? Whether that's the main character who is dealing with this disease, or it's a book about the caregivers who are helping and caring for and watching the disease from the side, I would love to know the books that you recommend. I think the more books we have on hard, challenging topics like this, the more people will feel less alone if they see themselves inside the pages. I believe books can help you grow through what you go through, and I think this is a topic that perfectly illustrates that. Now, let's think about how we can take it forward. You know, I love talking about books on a topic, but then thinking about how our reading life can impact our actual life. So I think the first thing that I would challenge you to do this week is to educate yourself. Learn as much as you can about the brain and how it works and how we can take care of it so that we are setting ourselves up for the best brain health we have in the future as we can. If you don't know where to start, I highly recommend Googling Dr. Amen. He wrote the book, You Happier, that I have talked about on the podcast before. And he has so many resources on the very small, little, doable, practical things we can do in our everyday lives in order to protect our brain as we age and protect our brain from pandemics and to heal our brain from all sorts of things. So if this is a topic that's new to you, I encourage you to just explore it a bit and see what are some small changes you can make to set your brain up for the healthiest version of itself in the future. Now, you also might consider donating to the cause. The Alzheimer's Association and other nonprofits are out there doing important work. There are walks that you could donate to. There are individual unique fundraisers on a certain day of the month that you could contribute to. And there are probably local organizations and charities that are doing this important work as well. The only way forward is through information and research and new ideas, and that needs to be funded. Lastly, I think the one thing that I'm going to keep taking away from this is to hold on to the people that you love. Hold on to the people that you love and tell them. Tell them what you think. Tell them what you feel while they can understand, while they can feel it, so they can hold on to that if and when they ever need to access it, if and when they ever need to, or they're ever struggling to remember, they'll still feel that. They'll still know it. I remember when my mother-in-law, who struggled with dementia, she came over for a little bit. And at that point, she didn't really remember who we were. She knew that we were her people. She knew that her grandkids were hers, but she didn't quite recommend or remember our names or quite what was going on. And as she was leaving, we all give our hugs and we said goodbye. And she was walking out the door and she stopped and she turned around and she looked right at me with these clear eyes that you could just tell that she was in a moment of clarity. And she said to me and everybody standing behind me, "Don't worry, everything will be okay." And she gave us her typical smile. And then she turned around and the moment was lost and she walked out the door. I will never forget that moment. I can still hear her say the words. I can still see that look in her eyes. And we all just teared up because we realized that was grandma. In that moment, that was grandma. And even if all the other moments, she doesn't have that same kind of clarity, she knows she's loved. She knows that we're still here. And it was just a very big reminder that those moments can be fleeting. And you just have to hold on to it ever you can and not take any of it for granted. That's the lesson that I hope I continue to take away from an episode like this, from a topic like this. And I hope that you do the same. So I would love to know your recommendations and what you think. As always, you can find me at Affinito Lit on all of the social platforms, and you can find a space to comment on the show notes at alitlife.com. And remember, the more comprehensive list will be coming on the website, so I will post that link as well. Before I head off, though, I do want to share one more thing. It's June, and that means that summer reading season is just about here. On June 17th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on a Zoom call, I am hosting a summer reading launch party. We are going to get together for an hour and just get jazzed up about the months and the reading ahead. I'll offer a couple of concrete ways that you can make sure you give all the attention you want to give to your reading life this summer. There will be book lists, we'll have spaces to share books and ideas together, and there will be lots of bookish prizes. Think books, think book journals, and think notebooks. I just want to have a space where we can all come together and get excited about what we love the most, which is reading, and then make a plan so that we actually accomplish what we hope to over the summer. So if you'd like to learn more about that, just click the links in the show notes and you'll be able to register with a quick click, and the Zoom link and all the information you need will be sent right to your inbox. Okay, that's it for today's episode. I look forward to hearing the titles you recommend to me. So bye for now and happy reading. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing lives, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. But one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks so much for listening.